James and Vicky Crocker bought this 4-bedroom house in Staines to start a family in. With 60 grand to spend on a refurb, it was meant to be the perfect nesting ground. But 6 months on, that budget is looking seriously undercooked.
This house has been soaking up water and there's cracks appearing all over the place. And understandably, Vicky and James are really, really worried about it.
On top of that, it looks like the loft and roof are held up by 2 flimsy stud walls, which could lead to catastrophic structural failure. Poor James and Vicky are living in the middle of it all. I'm bringing in a team of top professionals to investigate every inch of this property. Armed with the latest technology, they'll be diagnosing the problems and helping to come up with solutions.
We just want to know what's going on. Everything is kind of on hold while we're waiting to try and get everything else fixed.
The first major cloud hanging over their property is an alarming array of cracks, which are a classic symptom of subsidence. Most homeowners' worst nightmare. On the case is Simon Pitchers, a chartered structural engineer with nearly 30 years' experience.
There's a crack here. It looks quite wide when you examine it, but width is not the most important thing. The question about cracks is whether they are moving or not.
If it's an old crack which isn't moving, that's fine. But if it's growing wider or spreading, that's a bad sign. Simon thinks he knows exactly where to find the answer on the other side of the wall.
I think there is a crack behind here. And if we do find a crack, but the wallpaper isn't broken, that would suggest that the crack is old and it hasn't moved since.
Because you can kind of tell from the age of the decoration that it's got a good 5–10 years wear in this. Let's go. Actually, there's no crack.
That's it. Well, that's a bit of a disaster.
But there could have been a crack.
Should we try the other side then? Maybe there's a crack over this side.
There it is.
That is the crack. That's it. So we could say, whenever this wallpaper was put up, that crack hasn't got any wider.
So it's not moving. Well, Vicky and James are going to be so relieved by that because I know they're really worried about the movement.
Simon has ruled out subsidence, but he's still unsure about those recent bathroom cracks. And there's also a big worry about how the roof is being supported. Vicky and James can't get the answers quick enough. They've been living for the last 6 months in a total wreck.
Everything's covered in dust. You go to put on your work clothes in the morning and they're filthy, and you know, like even stuff in the wardrobe, somehow the dust has got into it and it's all covered.
While Simon continues his structural survey, I'm turning my attention to the wet, rotten floorboards on the ground floor, which have long-term damp problems written all over them. Damp either rises up from the ground or penetrates in from the outside. So which is it here? A moment later, I get a little helping hand to find out.
It's just started raining while we've been filming, and you can see just what happens to the gutters. It's pouring over the top. It's not surprising this house is wet. The gutters are failing all over the place.
Vicky and James have a nasty case of penetrating damp. This happens when water from rain or snow penetrates into a property due to faults in the exterior. Bricks actually absorb moisture, so a big problem are defective gutters that cause a great deal of water to hit your walls rather than being channeled into the drains. The worst culprit is missing mortar between bricks, as this funnels water straight into your home. Inside, damage starts with staining. It progresses to eroding the walls themselves and can cause whole sections of structural woodwork to decay. It also creates ideal conditions for fungus, which is a no-go for anyone with breathing problems. The trick is to make sure water is running off your house in the right way. Check that overflow pipes aren't dripping onto your walls. Make sure gutters and downpipes are working free from leaks and vegetation. Above all, look after your pointing. My fear for Vicky and James is that damp has been seeping into the floor for some time, causing wood decay to spread under the boards. Our specialist Steve Hodgson gets the privilege of inspecting the house from beneath. Steve squeezes and squirms his way around every part of the property's underbelly.
It's not a pretty job, this, eh?
Before coming up with his findings.
It looks worse than it is. There's a few areas where wet has been getting in. There's a few floorboards to replace, but actually the condition of the floor isn't bad. It's okay.
I have an ominous feeling this house isn't done with Vicky and James yet. Our chartered structural engineer Simon is still deep into his investigation.
It is a little bit weird having all these people we don't know crawling around in the house and knowing they're looking for things that are going to hurt us.
Unfortunately for Vicky and James, Simon's found a brand new problem that no one saw coming.
This is what I'm worried about. See the wallpaper? It's been ripped at the junction between the wall and the ceiling. And also, if you look at that gap, see how it's narrow at the bottom? I can only just get my finger in. And yet, as it comes up, I can put my whole hand in there.
So the wall is bowing out, so it's got a curve on it that's bowing out.
Distortions in buildings are a bit like oil tankers. Once they start going a particular way, they will continue to go that particular way. And unless you do something, you know, it could be quite catastrophic.
It's not unusual for old brick walls to bow. And this is just one of a number of problems Vicky and James have to face up to.
Now, we've looked at the house and done a lot of digging around, and most of the problem with the house being wet is because it's not holding the rain out from the outside. And actually, as soon as you stop the water coming in from the outside, there isn't going to be a problem with the inside.
What's actually causing that?
It's the gutters that are failing, and they're badly put up at the front, desperately needs doing, will make a massive difference to the building itself. And then we come onto the structure of the building, and I think that you know that there's been a lot of signs of movement all over the place with the house. The good news, I'll start with, the good news is that it has had subsidence in the past, and it would appear that it's no longer moving. It's stabilised.
Well, that's better than we thought, to be honest, so thanks.
The bad news is that this end wall here is bowing outwards, and by that I mean this. If you imagine this is your wall, pressure from the roof, the weight of the roof, it's pushing it, and as it pushes it, can you see that bow?
Yeah.
So it's in a curve like that, and then eventually it will go like that, and it will continue to bow until you tie it back in.
Right, so, but you can tie it back in.
You can tie it back in. It desperately needs to be done, that.
Tying in the wall could cost up to £5,000. That's another huge chunk out of Vicky and James's 60 grand budget.
The only thing left, which is a kind of major thing, is the construction of the top of the roof, which, to be honest, we still haven't quite got to the bottom of. Right. It's baffling everyone a little bit. Now, the thing is you're about to disturb everything underneath it.
So we shouldn't start any work then until we get that information?
Certainly what our structural engineer has advised is that until he's worked out why it's still up there, you don't want to be taking anything off underneath.
Vicky and James's dream is to have a master bedroom in the loft and to knock through the wall beneath it so their second bedroom can have an ensuite as well. For now, a dream is what it will have to remain.
To be honest, just sort of felt a bit sick. You know, that's just a really horrible worry. And as soon as we all turned around and walked off, suddenly running through your head is these scenarios of lying in bed and the ceiling caves in on you. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what, you know, what Simon says about what we can do about it.
For the moment, Vicky and James shouldn't be interfering with the property in any way, especially not knocking down walls. Even stripping off the plaster in the loft calls for some remedial safety work.
Now that you've taken the laths and the plaster off, there's actually nothing to stop them moving a tiny bit in just jiggling around a tiny bit. And that's why you're seeing hairline cracks appearing in the bathroom.
Yeah, it didn't cross my mind that a skanky old mouldy plaster was doing a useful job.
But we can strengthen it up again relatively simply. One way of solving the problem is to get plywood and to nail it onto these vertical struts, which will just give it that little bit of rigidity back. So if you bring that over and lodge it into place, right up against the vertical struts. So we're going to have some nail gun fun. Woo! So I'm going to leave it to you. Once this is done, you can plasterboard over it, so you don't have to take it off again, and hopefully keep it from moving any further.
Woo! Oh, that's quite good fun.
The golden rule is be extra cautious about removing anything from a building until you understand how it's all held together. For expert advice... One thing Vicky and James can do without putting the house at risk is the crucial maintenance to the exterior. They're replacing the guttering and downpipes, which should see the back of their damp problems.
Kind of makes sense to sort out the problems on the outside first and then see what happens. You know, hopefully the house will dry out and maybe not need such a, you know, so much work protecting it from the damp on the inside.
It's great to get it fixed, but the guttering cost another £2,000. It's one more cost they hadn't bargained on.
We're getting the jobs done that we have to get done. Hopefully, you know, we're not going to find a load of other problems that are going to cost a load more. But, you know, every sort of pound we spend doing stuff is a pound less we get to spend inside the house to make the house look really nice.
It's a hugely tense time for James and Vicky. Simon's been scratching his head, wondering how the flimsy-looking wall they're planning to knock through could possibly hold the weight of the roof. Using the thermal imaging camera to X-ray the wall, we've made a breakthrough.
So that's the actual pieces of wood that the wall is made of?
That's correct, yes.
Ah, that explains an awful lot about this wall.
The major worry was that two lightweight stud walls, which are usually made with slight vertical timbers, are bearing the massive load from the roof. Structurally, this could be very dangerous. The thermal image shows a subtle but very important difference.
This is a photograph of what they saw projected onto the same wall. When you look at the thermal imaging camera, you can see that there are more than the vertical studs in this stud wall, and actually there's these two cross beams as well, and it's those diagonal posts forming an A-frame, and that shape has massive amounts of structural integrity. So this is why the roof is staying up.
This is an unusual form of construction which is so difficult to recognise it can lead people to make catastrophic mistakes.
When we went round and we were knocking and we discovered it was just a stud wall, that's what made us think, well, you know, stud wall, they can be removed.
Not on your Nelly. I'm going to show how knocking through this wall to create an ensuite could end in disaster.
So what we've built here is a model of the stud wall that you have on the first floor in your bedroom, because that's what's holding the roof up. Whilst it looks a bit flimsy, this structure is very, very strong.
The wall in Vicky and James's house is carrying around 2 tons or 2,000 kilos of load from the roof. I want to see what happens if we cut a doorway in its middle. But first, just how strong is the present structure?
Let's take it up to 1 ton load and see what happens. It's a good, strong piece of wood, isn't it? Keep going, another ton, please, if that's okay. Oh, I can hear a creak. So it's creaking at 1.5 tons. We'll take it up to 2 tons. So we're now at 2.5 tons, and this is still holding it, though, which I think is pretty impressive. Let's crank it up and see how much more we can put it under. Let's take it up to 3 tons. Nearly 3.5 tons. It's still holding it up there, so keep on going, yeah. So it failed at 3.5 tons.
That's more than man enough to carry the 2-ton load from the roof.
OK, we'll lay it down over here.
OK.
But how strong will it be if a doorway is cut out of it?
What so many people would do if they saw a bit of stud work like this, quite understandably, because generally they're not actually holding anything up. They'd just cut through it and put the doorway in. OK, so now we'll see how much this can take. So if you could turn it on. Oh, it's creaking already. It's not looking good. So it's nearly 200, so this is 1/5 of a ton. This is a tiny amount of weight. So we're 525 kilograms. It's just a fraction less than I weigh. It's about to go. Oh, there we go. So it cracked at just over 1/2 ton. And that's 1/7 of what it could take with that diagonal beam in. It could be a messy mess if you cut a doorway through that.
Yeah, I think I'll can that idea.
Yeah, probably a good idea. Probably a good idea to leave this wall intact.
It's 8 months since Vicky and James moved in, and only now can they really get moving on their home. What a mountain to climb.
I was expecting something like that to happen. James and plumbing has not so far been a very good mix.
For starters, all the blown plaster has to be stripped off and the whole interior revamped. There's also the big £5 job of fixing the bowing wall, not to mention the bowing floor. If that wasn't pressure enough, Vicky and James now get a bombshell. Their bank is tightening its belt and will only loan 40 of the £60,000 budget.
The last couple of weeks have been awful. I kept not sleeping, and so go to bed, fall asleep immediately because I was tired, and then wake up about an hour later and just be lying there just worrying and thinking about money and invoices and buildings and what we could afford and what we couldn't afford.
To cut costs, the pressure is on to do all they can themselves. But because Vicky's so busy with her job, James is practically working solo. That ideal family home seems a very long way away.
Yeah, I mean, it is a total building site at the minute. I mean, it'd be horrible to have kids sort of living in here at the minute, but obviously we've got at least 9 months until that's going to happen, so, you know, hopefully in 9 months' time the house should be finished.
One job that can't wait is making safe the bowing wall. Vicky and James can't afford the £5,000 to bring in a contractor. As far as I'm concerned, that leaves only one solution.
You want for some serious structural DIY, then? We're going to stop this side wall from collapsing, basically.
A bit scary that we're going to be taking the structural integrity of our house into our own hands.
Yeah.
I wouldn't ever recommend you did any structural work to a house, especially shoring it up, unless you'd spoken to a structural engineer. But we have spoken to Simon, and he has specified exactly what we've got to do.
Old brick walls often bow under the weight of the building they're supporting. If you notice one of your walls starting to bow, then you need to fix it immediately. What starts as a small curve can quickly turn into an alarming bulge and ultimately end in catastrophic structural failure. The traditional fix is to use a metal brace attached to a heavy steel bar that ties the wall to the floor joists. Shoring up a bowing wall can be a big job, but the theory behind it is pretty simple.
If you imagine this piece of wood as the end wall of their house, when you put weight on top of it, which I'm going to here, you'll find that it will start to bow. Now, the problem is once it starts to bow, it tends to continue. Ultimately, it will collapse. The important thing to do is tie it in, which stops it moving anymore. It's very simple, really. You can drill holes from the outside and then feed the rods through into joists at the other side. So if we now put the weights on, this is twice the load that I had on before, and because of these restraints, it doesn't allow it to bend in the middle.
For DIY, I've tracked down the latest tie-in technology that should enable Vicky and James to do the job themselves.
We're basically going to screw the outside wall to the joist with a mighty long screw. And the reason it works is because you've got so many. If you just put one in, it wouldn't probably do much, but we're going to put 10 all the way across the wall. Who handles the power tools in your relationship?
I think James is the master of the drill.
First, James has to drill a hole through the external wall, level with the floor joists.
OK, you're through. OK, that's it. Great. Right. Next, we get the wall tie and we screw it through the joists. OK, keep going. OK, you're through.
The rod is screwed firmly into the joist. At the other end, a special glue cements the rod into the brickwork.
Traditionally, you see a big S or a Z or a big wall tie going right the way across the wall, but this glue is incredibly strong and takes the place of it.
It's saving them up to £5,000, but is adding to James's huge workload. He's putting in the most amazing effort, but pushing himself so hard, I'm worried he's close to breaking point.
At the minute, it's just like, this just seems to be going on forever and like a walking zombie most of the time. And, you know, because I'm working and I'm trying to do this and coming back in the evening, doing a load of work on the house. I was up to like 12 last night, stripping wallpaper. I can't really see an end in sight at the minute.
On Thursday night, I thought he was going to start crying. He just doesn't want to be here. Yeah, I think he's really feeling it, to be honest.
Vicky and James have now been battling their property for 10 months. Money is tighter than ever. Unfortunately, there's one final big structural job that has to be done. The loft floor still needs levelling. There's no choice but to do some more hardcore DIY. I think we can save another £5,000.
The two solutions aesthetically is to either rip the ceiling down and take all the joists out and replace them, or there is another solution, and that's that we winch it back up and tie it all together.
Yeah, that sounds good.
The floor joists would originally have been sat tight up against this supporting beam above. Over time, the joists have dropped a good 5 centimetres, and that's causing the bowing.
So here we are, we're directly underneath that cross beam. What we're going to do is put a scaffolding board on the top, we've got a scaffolding board on the bottom, and we're going to put acros between them. That's it.
The plan is to physically jack the joists back up into position from below, using extendable steel bars called acros.
Very slowly, we should be able to get those rafters back up. Put your back into it. I think we should see if that's gone as far as it can or not. Hey, look at that! What a result!
Whoa, that's great.
God, that's great. Look at that. I mean, bearing in mind that was the gap before, and now it's a tiny little gap. It's closed up by about 4 or 5 centimetres. What a result. Try a bit more. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So 20 minutes later, we've levelled the floor.
Excellent.
Now all we have to do is tie the floor joists back into the beam above with steel straps, a hammer and nails.
Then we can let the acros go downstairs. It's all fixed.
It's amazing, it just seems so easy.
Yeah, now the floor's totally flat. I dread to think how much a builder would have probably charged for that, and it's, you know, really going to have taken us not long at all to do the entire floor.
10 months after they moved in, there's now nothing to stop Vicky and James from putting their home back together. Or so you'd think. The harshest winter for 30 years descends on the whole of the UK.
So depressed.
All the plumbing and heating is being installed. Costing another 10 grand, it means Vicky and James battle to fix up the interior in a freezing DIY marathon.
I hope it's our low point because I can't imagine it getting any worse. But at the moment it feels like we're going through a load of hard work just basically to get the house how it was when we bought it, except not mouldy or dangerous.
I just hope Vicky and James have the stamina to work through and finally achieve the family home they were dreaming of nearly a year ago. Though for now, starting a family is the last thing on their minds.
I go to bed wearing all of the clothes I own. It's so cold. It's not really a very romantic atmosphere. Just can't wait for it to be finished.